tentative deal has literally just been reached in the ongoing BC teachers dispute. Marathon talks between the union and the provincial government went until the wee hours of this morning. For more on that, let's head live to Richmond right now, where Greg Harper joins us with more on this huge news that literally developed, Greg, in the last 90 minutes or so. What do we know?
That's right. Good morning, Kyle. Great news, huge news. 3:50 a.m. Tuesday, September 16th. Mark that on the calendar. That's when this labor dispute ended. At least it looks as though it has. A tentative agreement has been reached. This after government negotiators and the union spent the weekend here at the Delta Hotel in Richmond, a marathon weekend of bargaining. That continued yesterday and into this morning as well. They were bargaining for over 16 hours. Mediator Vince Reddy, he left here just after 4 o'clock this morning. He spoke to the media briefly. He's not releasing any details.
After all these hours, I'm very pleased to announce that the parties have reached a tentative agreement. I'm not at liberty to release any of the details, nor are the parties. The parties are going to meet later this morning and finalize the few of the outstanding details. But generally speaking, there has been a tentative agreement initialed by the parties, and that's really all I've got to say at this point.
Can you tell us anything about the length of the contract?
No, I'm not at liberty to disclose any of the details, and nor will the parties until they finalize them. That's the agreement they've come to. So
when can we expect to hear more?
Presumably later today. They're going to meet later on this morning. Everybody's a bit tired right now.
How did this happen? The signs seem so far apart just days ago. How did this happen?
Well, it's a process of negotiations. Yeah. So anyway.
Did both sides make concessions?
Both parties worked very hard to get this agreement. I'm not at liberty to comment on the details of the agreement, and I leave that to the parties.
So you won't say who moved in order to get past the impasse?
No, the parties worked hard to get the agreement. I'll leave it at that.
So here's the next big question, certainly a question that a lot of parents want the answer to. When will school be back in session? Well, I heard back from the BCTF, and there will likely be no school tomorrow. It's the union's policy that a strike doesn't end until a deal is ratified. So what's happening now, and you heard a bit there from Vince Reddy, both parties are taking a break. They're exhausted. They need to finalize the details. Once that is done, one would imagine teachers will begin to vote. This could take a couple of days. It might take longer. Maybe it won't take as long as that, but it looks as though no school tomorrow. Kyle?
Well, Greg, there's a lot of questions that still have to be answered this morning, of course. The main one was just how could this have happened literally so fast? When you look at how these negotiations have been going on literally for the last couple of days, if not weeks, and Vince Reddy walking away from the negotiations just a couple of weeks ago as to how things managed to get condensed and figured out overnight this morning. Why did it take so long to get that deal figured out?
That's a question a lot of people want the answer to. I mean, these sides really far apart for quite some time, but it was feeling like good news was coming. The fact that mediator Vince Reddy was involved with the talks here, he hadn't left them like he did during the Labor Day long weekend. We don't know the details of this tentative agreement. What we do know going into it is that, well, Jim Eicher, the president of the BCTF, you know, his message throughout this labor dispute was the big issue, class size and composition. Of course, we know that teachers didn't like that E80 clause. They wanted to be able to negotiate class size and composition, get that back into the collective agreement, and to be able to negotiate that years from now. And we know what the government was saying, that it was about wages and benefits, and that needed to get resolved in order to get to the class size and composition. So we know that one party moved here, perhaps both. A tentative agreement has been reached. We don't know the details yet, and we're not sure, Kyle, when school will be back in session. Again, not likely tomorrow.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, the teachers certainly they need to ratify this agreement before we can kind of proceed with at least thinking about heading back to school this morning. The BCTF has been active on Twitter this morning talking about the tentative agreement. Of course, we have not yet heard on social media from the Premier or from Education Minister Peter Fassbender, but certainly some more information coming from them later today. And then there's also this question, Greg, about that $40 a day per child in terms of childcare that the government was offering up, how that entire process is going to work out. Still, another question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, last I heard, Kyle, 75% of the parents who are eligible, who have children that are 13 and under, did register on this website. And I've heard that parents will receive their money, but it won't be until 30 days after this dispute has ended. That's my latest understanding on that. This will be a much-needed money for a lot of parents who really have been coping. For some, this has been a child care issue. For those that have kids that are going into grade 12, they're worried about post-secondary and getting their grades in on time. So, I mean, those details will be ironed out, but my latest understanding, parents can expect their money 30 days after this dispute officially comes to an end.
Well, and who knows, it perhaps officially came to an end about 90 minutes ago, but we have yet to see that. We'll hear more from both sides later this morning. Greg Harper live for us today in Richmond. We'll continue to follow that story and be on top of that.